everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be looking at the support tier list for 11/16. So as always, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out a ton on the channel. Check out the rest of the content as well. I just released patch notes earlier today, and I'm going to try to do an 80 carry tier list tomorrow. Check out the stream. We've moved the stream over to Twitch now. So the Strategy Professor on Twitch. I'll probably make a video about it soon, but I just think that might be a better fit for live streaming right now for us. And we're going to be streaming over there maybe a little bit earlier, maybe from like 11 to 2:30, 11 to 3, something like that. So come by, check it out. Very friendly, chill community. I always announce it on Twitter as well, so you can follow me on Twitter at @TheStratProf every time I go live streaming and every time I release a new video like these tier lists or guides or any other content on the channel. I announce it on Twitter as well, just because sometimes YouTube doesn't give notifications for that. So be sure to check all that out, and we have tons and tons of coaching sessions, guides, and other content on this channel as well if you're new and you want to check that stuff out. Okay, let's go ahead and get in here. So I don't think the meta is going to change too much, and I want to spend this time highlighting some of the item changes and some of the more subtle shifts in the meta that I've seen over the last couple weeks and where I think it's going to go, rather than just kind of explaining every single time why a certain champion is strong, just so I can make the tier list a little bit faster. So I still think that Lulu is going to be really good. She had a decent win rate last time. It has gone down a little bit in just like one day of patch, but she's just so versatile. That's what makes her good, is she still has Whimsy. It's like a 2.25 second when maxed out stun effectively. Boosts up your turbo ADCs like your Jinx, your Kog'Maws, all of that stuff. So she works around hyper carry ADCs really well. She gives a lot of movement speed, which is really good for engaged champions like Hecarim, Rammus, just anything that wants to get in there. She has that. And then her ultimate is really nice because it evades grievous wounds. So it's an infusion of health, not a heal, so it gets around grievous wounds. There's a lot of grievous wounds going around out there. And one of the new itemization changes that I found particularly effective is getting the Putrefier second. And the main reason is because, like I just said, there's tons and tons of healing. There's way too much in the game right now. You have all sorts of champions going Shield Bow, Blade of the Ruined King, Divine Sunder, Gore Drinker. It's just everywhere. So being able to spend 2,300 gold to get an item that is pretty effective on its own. It has ability haste, has ability power, has base mana regen, has almost everything that you want except for like a little bit of health. But other than that, it's perfect. So it's really, really good to get this item on Enchanter second, I would say like 80% of the time. Now, they did just buff up Redemption on this patch, so that is, you know, something to consider, and we'll see how that develops. But I feel like it's still not strong enough to displace the Putrefier, just because, again, there's going to be a lot of healing, so that means there's going to be a lot of grievous wounds as well. So that's going to cut into the power of the Redemption. And this is a skill shot, right? Which means you can miss it, your allies can run out of it. All sorts of bad things can happen with this to make it less effective. And Putrefier is just going to work. This is also much less effective in kind of the YOLO queue, let's just run around and get into a bunch of random fights, which is what's going on right now. There are a lot of hard carry, you know, solo champs out there with the Irelia, Gwen, Camille, Fiora, and then you've got your mid lane assortment of assassins, your Zeds, your Talons, Fizz, all that kind of stuff. They want a really spread out map where there's lots of people getting picked off, lots of rotations. So Redemption just works a lot better in a clean 5v5 front-to-back team comp where everybody's going to be grouped up. And ideally where you have tanks, you get extra effective healing off of that Redemption because of the armor, because of the magic resist, and where people don't have grievous wounds, obviously. And a lot of that just doesn't apply to the meta right now. So I think that this item can be good, especially on people who get Moonstone, like Soraka and Yuumi, that we'll talk about in a little bit. But I still think that you probably just want to stick with the Putrefier second most of the time. Ardent Censer is very good too. If you do have that hyper carry and they are doing very well, then you can go for Ardent Censer instead. And I think that Shrelia's is still the go-to. Ardent Censer has a pretty good win rate as a rush item, but Shrelia's is way more popular, and it's just really good adding that extra movement speed onto everybody. I still think it's going to be the go-to on most enchanters. So, Lulu's still going to be very strong. Yes, I did nerf her W. That one could matter. I don't think that the ult is going to matter that much because you're not using the ult on cooldown, right? You're using it reactively when someone else makes a play most of the time. So that's different from a Leona or a Rakan where that ult cooldown matters a lot more because every time it's off cooldown, you want to try to make a play. You might be holding that Lulu's ultimate for a little bit longer than those other ones, so the cooldown reduction is not going to matter because you're only going to cast it once per fight anyways. So it does matter, just not as much as on an engaged champion. So overall, I still think she's going to be really strong if played properly. Now, this is recommending Aerie. I recommend Guardian on her just because it gives you that extra layer of protection, and usually if you don't die, you're going to win. So Aerie does have a higher win rate. It does give you more poke in lane. So I guess if you have like double ranged against melee or something that's going to be really passive early on in lane and you really want to put some pressure on, I think that Aerie can work, but I tend to like Guardian later just because it gives you that protection against assassinations. Now, regardless of whether you go Aerie or Guardian, you definitely want Font of Life because this is the key that makes the Putrefier work so well on a lot of champions is whenever you apply a slow to somebody, like with your Q primarily, it's going to put the font debuff on them, and then whenever someone auto-attacks that person who has that debuff, that counts as a heal coming from you. It's not lifesteal on them, it's a heal from you, and that triggers the Putrefier. So if you just, use the Q, hit somebody on the front line, they get that debuff, all of your allies, hit them, auto-attack them, everybody on your whole team is going to get that Putrefier debuff. So it just spreads it throughout the whole team really easily. So you can put it on people, with your shield, but you can also put it on much more thoroughly, I guess you could say, with Font of Life. It's going to distribute it much better. And then Revitalize is just kind of the next best thing, but you're mostly going in this tree for Font of Life. Now, if you do go for Guardian first, you obviously will pick those up in your primary tree, and then I think that opens you up to get something like Zombie Ward and then Relentless Hunter. And I think Relentless Hunter helps out a lot because she's pretty slow. She has a slow base movement speed, and you really want Ionians instead of mobility boots on her most of the time. So if you get Relentless Hunter, that's going to help you with those rotations, with the YOLO Q that I just mentioned before. Yes, you can use Whimsy on yourself to run up to stuff faster, but especially with that lower or that longer cooldown on it, you want to make sure your Whimsy is available when you arrive at the fight. So you can do it running out of base, but it's a little risky to use your Whimsy for that movement speed. So if you can use something like Relentless Hunter, I think that helps out a lot. Okay, so Lulu's still going to be pretty strong. Let's keep moving to the next one here. So Leona, not a lot new going on here. She's still just going to be very strong, and a big part of what makes Leona stronger than some of the other tanks, in my opinion, is just her really, really low cooldowns, right? Like her Q base cooldown of 6 seconds, combined with her E, I think can scale all the way down to 6 seconds as well. With the abundance of ability haste that's in the game right now, if you get Locket and then you get, something like Zeke's second, then you're just going to have an insane amount of cooldown reduction. And she still has a 90 seconds on her ultimate, which is just absolutely insane. Why is it that when Rakan's ult is like 130 or something, she's got a 90, on her ultimate? It's like she comes free with Ulti Hunter. So she's just really, really strong. It's got great range. Another really solid thing about her is that she can engage through minions, and she can very easily get access to the back line. So people can't body block her E. They can't body block her R. She's going to get to that ADC or that mage or whoever she's trying to get to, right? Versus something like Thresh, they can body block your hooks. If they have like an Alistar standing in front of their Jinx or something like that, you're not getting through that Alistar. So that just makes her a lot more disruptive in team fights. And she's extremely difficult to kill, especially in the early game, because her W not only gives a lot of armor and magic resist, but it also gives a flat damage reduction on that, which is very good when you're, diving into the enemy minion wave and you're getting hit by all those minions. You obviously don't want to do that if you don't have to, but she's going to take less damage from that than most other champions in the game. So I think that's really solid. And I don't know how Frozen Heart is doing on her, but with the abundance of AD carries or just AD bruisery champs that are out there right now, that rely on auto attacks, when you think about Irelia, when you think about Camille, Xin Zhao, there's a bunch of them out there. I feel like Frozen Heart is really undervalued and is very strong. So there's not a high representation there, not a lot of games played on it, but it's got a really high win rate of 77%. So it's just something to think about with her that could potentially be good. Doesn't mean you get it every game. You might get Zeke's instead most games, or Thornmail is another one that's becoming really popular. Because whenever you CC somebody, it gives them the Grievous for 60 seconds. So just the Bramble Vest, they have to hit you, and they can just not hit you and, not get the Grievous wounds. But with Thornmail, it's whenever you CC them, then you apply the 60%. So the Thornmail upgrade is actually really big on her. So I think a lot of games you're probably just going to go lock it into Zeke's, lock it into Frozen Heart, or lock it into Thornmail, depending on what's going on. And I think you want to get the Grievous if you can, because it's really far out of the way of most AD carries to get Executioners right now. And same with mages. So it's really just a lot easier for the supports to get it, especially now that it's 2,700 gold instead of 2,900 gold. Just something to consider. But yeah, she's still going to be really good. Rakan's the next one that I still think is really good. He is seeing a little bit more pro play right now. I know that a lot of tier lists have him a lot lower than I do. I also recognize that I am biased because I play a lot of Rakan and I think he's awesome. But I do legit think that he's moving up a little bit. Zyra did get a pretty big buff last patch. She's still really hard to play in solo queue, so a lot of people are not going to play her. But you do have the Zyra effect. But then also, he's just a great user of the Shirelia's Putrefier combo, right? So he has really good utility for his team. You know, he can pay that 2,300 gold to get that 60% Grievous. That's key that I mentioned before. And he has an engage. He's one of the few champions that can get the Putrefier and start a fight comfortably. So that's really where he's going to shine, is on that 2-item power spike. He can do Ionians as well. So that means that he's going to have kind of the maxed out ability haste for starting fights. The only one who's going to be able to start fights more often that's an engaged champion is probably Leona, just because her base is 90 for some reason. But he's going to be able to start fights more often, I think, than something like a Nautilus. I guess Thresh can start fights with hooks anytime. But he's going to have a fairly low ultimate, especially if you go ulti hunter as well. And it's so effective because you can run at them. You have 4 seconds. And a lot of times you can get them to flash or dash or use whatever first, and then you use your W to follow up. So his ult has a built-in gap closer plus engage on top of it. So it's a lot harder if you're playing it properly with Rakan. It's a lot harder to get away from him. So I still think that makes him really good. Now this is, again, what you're going to get most of the time, I think. So the redemption buff is nice. I just feel like you're not going to get it most games, because if you do get it, it would be 3rd item. And most games are done by the time you get to 3. But it could be a decent 3rd item if you have that front-to-back 5v5 team comp. I have experimented with Watchful Wardstone for more vision, but I feel like it's been a little lackluster. If you just go Zombie Ward second, which I recommend now over Ghost Poro, just because in this season it seems like so many more people are actually warding, especially in Platinum. People have really stepped their game up with the wards. That Zombie Ward plus Sweeper plus normal control wards is probably enough vision control for a lot of situations. So I just think that Watchful is a little underwhelming. Yeah, he's pretty good. As you can see, he definitely starts taking off late game. It is a bit tougher early just because his cooldowns are so long. Like his W is an 18-second cooldown. His E is, I think, like an 18-second cooldown early on. So that is a little bit on the rough side. But if you can just make it through that laning phase, he is very good. And he does have nice engage as well, you know, right? Even with the W, like you can go through the minion wave kind of like Leona. It is a skill shot. You do have to land it. But you can have some pretty good, you know, fight potential in the early game if you land your W, Q, and then double shield. You can have kill potential. So not as much probably as Leona or Alistar or whatever, but you can get it done if you want to be aggressive. It's just you can get punished as well. And his mana cost, his trading pattern is kind of high also because you want to use all 3 abilities for a trade. What is it, Rory? Daddy's working. What is it? What is it?
Is there a big pool in here?
Yeah, it's right there. There you go. Okay. Yeah, we'll play in just a little bit. But yeah, why don't you go play with Big Po and Mommy for a bit? Doesn't that sound fun? Maybe she can give you some food.
Ooh, she already made Rocky some food.
Okay.
That is pup food.
Down a little bit there. But anyway, so I think he's still going to be pretty good. Underrated. Long cooldowns early. But he is super safe too. So if you think you're going to be playing weak side, you think they're going to dive you a lot on the enemy team, or that your jungler is going to play around top side, he is very, very safe. So he can escape from things that are good. And he's really good into like hook type of champions like Blitzcrank, Thresh, stuff like that, because you can dodge those hooks so easily. So I think he does have a place. I think he is very good. You just have to be careful in the early game because he can potentially get bullied out. Okay, and then moving down to tier 2, I think that Yuumi is going to be really good in solo queue, especially like platinum and lower. If she doesn't get punished really hard, and if you have a hyperscaler on your team, so she's very good with stuff like Twitch, because they can both go invisible, or Vayne, And she's just a ticking time bomb, right? If the enemy can't close out, if they don't have a lot of pressure, so she's great against stuff like Ezreal and, you know, other enchanters that aren't going to be able to pressure you early. If you just get going, she's really, really difficult to stop. If she gets Moonstone and then Redemption, she is going to be one of the people that are very good with Redemption. Now, I do still think that Putrefier, again, is going to be extremely strong with the Putrefier Font of Life combo. Now, you don't actually get Font on her, so I guess that's one consideration. But you can still put the Putrefier on your main target whenever with just your E. So that is handy. And if you do have Airy and you jump around to multiple targets, it will put the shield on them, and that will trigger the Putrefier. So you can still spread it around pretty well on a lot of people. But, you know, she's just untargetable late game. She pairs really well with any kind of bruiser. If you have a fed Irelia, fed Cassidon, whatever, there are a lot of hyper carries in the game right now, and she just amplifies that so much as the game breaks open. Pretty bad at vision control, pretty bad at roaming, but if you just stick with somebody who has high mobility, who's starting to scale really hard, then she's difficult to stop because she gives them the mobility, she gives them the extra AD or the AP, she gives them a heal, attack speed, she has the AoE ultimate that, you know, can root them for 1.75 seconds. So she has a lot of tools in her toolkit, and one thing that a lot of people really underestimate on her is she basically gets 950 free gold in her pocket because she doesn't have to buy boots. So that means that her first mythic is effectively, you know, going to be 1550. So she gets off to a really good start, and she can get Mage Eyes. Now, that did get nerfed on this patch, so that might be a nerf to Yuumi if you like to go for the Mage Eyes on her. Because the initial ring, the Dark Seal, got nerfed. But nevertheless, I still think she's really good. If you want a super hyper-scaling champ, she can be good. I think Lulu is going to be a little bit better in a lot of situations, but I would not sleep on her just because the meta is so much about like one champion hard carrying the game who gets super fed, right? If that Aurelia has 8 kills, it just doesn't matter what anyone else is doing in the game. And that's just the way that it is right now. It's a super snowball game based around all of these hyper carries, and there's so many getting played in every position, right? You've got jungle can play all these carries, the Dianas, the Xin Zhaos, the Gwens, top can play all these hard carries, middle's playing all these hard carries. So it's just like almost no teams are playing lots of utility, and that means you have a lot of opportunities to go off, as you mean. If you have 4 hyper carries on your team, there's a decent chance one of them does okay, and if you just attach to them, you can completely take over the game. So I think it is a pretty good meta overall for Yuumi. Alistar is another one, and I've got this spicy Nunu pick, so hang on to that. You might be thinking, what the hell, Nunu? We'll talk about that in a second. I think Alistar is underrated, and he's pretty good. I've played him some recently, and a lot of people are playing like poke champions right now, or at least that's what it seems like to me. Maybe it was just a few days where that was happening, where I was seeing a lot of like Xerath and stuff like that. You'll probably see some more like Sonas, Karmas, things like that, but he can heal through that really well for both you and your ally. And then, of course, he has his, you know, really hard, like, point-click engage. And he's very tanky, which means that you're pretty good against these other engaged champs like Leona, like Thresh, because they're going to have a hard time blowing you up if they hook you. And you can dive towers so well. So when you have all this damage coming out of the jungle, when you have these hyper carries like the Xin Zhaos, the Gwens, Dianas, all that stuff, if you can just get in there and just tank, you know, 5 tower hits, they can blow people up really fast. So I think his ability to tank towers early, his ability to roam early, the sustain that he has, the really hard engage that he has does position him well. Now, he is going to get outscaled really hard late game if they have like a 3-item Yuumi or something. And attached to something that's mobile, it is going to be hard to deal with that. But I think that he can snowball early. He can be very strong. He can be a nice answer if you want the tools that I just mentioned. So Leona can do a lot of that as well. She can tank a lot of tower shots. She doesn't have the sustain, so she can get poked out. I do think Leona is a bit stronger in a lot of situations, but Alistar is nice. So he's worth considering. Now, Maokai is another one, and on the limited data here, he does have a pretty high win rate, but he's had a high win rate for a while. Now, they did just nerf his AP version. Not really that much, honestly. Just the AP scaling on the seeds. It's like 5 off the base damage, which doesn't matter because it does hundreds of damage anyways. But they did buff the tank version. I'm going to have to get a feel for this and try it out, but they buffed his regeneration quite a bit off of his passive. They also buffed Dead Man's Plate. They had nerfed it. Then they rebuffed it a little bit over the last few patches, kind of toying around with it. But if you can get Boots of Swiftness and Dead Man's Plate, that's going to basically ensure you can get the engage off of your W. You just roll up, W somebody. Doesn't matter if they flash, doesn't matter if they dash, whatever they do, you're going to stick to them. Then that's perfect combo for your ultimate, your Q. So he has really, really good engage if you can get into range. And then the seeds still do pretty respectable damage, even if you're on the tanky side. And they give you tons and tons of extra vision, so that allows you to be more aggressive, to move your ward line forward, and that enables you to make more plays. So I still think that he's going to be very good. Abyssal Mask is another item that's really underrated, that's quite good on him, because his ultimate is, in a lot of cases, going to hit many people in a team fight, because it's very, very hard to dodge this. You basically have to have someone who's a tank on the enemy team, and everyone just lines up behind the tank, or else those brambles are going to hit him. And this increase of 15% extra damage, they buffed it from 10 to 15 a few patches ago, and a lot of people are sleeping on this item, but it's very, very strong on the right type of champion, and he is the type of champion for that. Another one, I don't have the data on Frozen Heart, but I think that Frozen Heart's another item that I would suspect is probably pretty good on him. Second, that might be overdoing it on the armor a little bit. So it's got a nice win rate, very, very low sample size, so, take that with a grain of salt. But he can also go Thornmail just like Leona as well. So you don't really need the Mythic on him. I mean, I don't know. Locket is good. It does have the 57%. But he's the type of champion where you may just not need the Mythic early on, just because having that extra movement speed off of Dead Man's can be so beneficial for him. So he's kind of like the other tanks in terms of engage, but he does have pretty high base magic damage. And it's really just that hyper dominant, very safe vision control that is so good on him. So I think he's a pretty decent option that is worth considering. Zyra is another one, and we'll try to keep this under 30. It'd be a huge accomplishment if I can do that. But Zyra is still going to be really good. She did get a nice buff a few patches ago when they lowered the cost of Leandries from 3,400 down to 3,200. That is nice. If you pair her together with someone else that has really good pressure in the early game, like a Caitlyn, Jhin just got a buff on this patch, very good with Jhin. Ashe, historically very good, poke with her volley, poke with your plants, and then she hits them with an arrow, you just blow them up with all of your stuff. Varus, another one, very good. So she has lots of good combos right now. Main issue with Zyra is that she's just so vulnerable in the mid to late game, because she's really slow. She doesn't have a lot of mobility as far as running across the map. She also doesn't have any short range dashes. You can use your plants to block some skill shots, but people can play around that. And you have really long cooldowns, kind of like Rakan. Your trades are very good early, but your plants start off on a 16-second cooldown, I think, and that just takes a really long time for your trades, which feels kind of bad. So I wish they'd lower the cooldown on the plants, even if they lower the damage a little bit to balance it out, or give you some other ways. Maybe if your plants hit people, it lowers the cooldown on the seeds by half a second or something. I think that would be really cool. So that if you're actually landing the plants and they're hitting people, you get some benefit out of it. That'd be a nice passive, but as it stands, she's okay. It's just her items are very expensive, like a lot of AP champs out there, and that's why I don't have the AP champs usually that highly valued, even though they are particularly good in silver, gold, and lower. It's just really expensive, right? When a lot of these other champions are going to be getting items at 2,500, you have to wait an extra 700 gold, which is probably another 5 minutes at least, unless you're just completely destroying people in the bottom lane. So she can lead the game in damage with a lot of her items, but I don't know, it just feels difficult to convert when you can just get flanked and killed later in the game with so much mobility, so many hard carry flank champions, so much lifesteal to heal through all of your stuff, shields like Sterix, and I don't know, there's just a lot of nonsense. So it feels like kind of these burst champions that are really slow to kind of level up in terms of power are having a hard time right now. And you just don't even see a lot of mages in mid lane right now either. It's a lot of these melee champs that just have a lot of free defense and mobility that are getting played middle. Right, you're not seeing your traditional Oriannas, Syndras, stuff like that often. You're seeing it a little bit more in pro, but just all about assassins or bruisers everywhere. And that's why, is because mages are kind of having a hard time in every role right now. Okay, Thresh did get nerfed last patch, but I still think that he can be really good if you're good on him. Same stuff applies. Nothing really new going on here. He does get Redemption, or he was building that quite a bit. He'd go Guardian into Locket into Redemption was a really common like 5v5 team fighting, type of build. But again, that's not happening a lot. There's a lot of yellow queue. And your hooks are good, but there are just so many tanky champions right now that can just make it through the hook with like a Sterix or something like that, right? If they have Divine Sunder plus Sterix, then it's, you can hook and start the fight, but they'll probably just turn it around and kill you anyways. So he just doesn't have a lot of sustained threat in fights, right? Like, yes, you have the hook. He does good damage early, but it falls off pretty hard late. His scaling is, he has some scaling with the souls, obviously, but he doesn't have good access to the back line. That's the big thing late game. Unless someone just walks around and just happens to walk into a hook in a bush, the Jinx, or, some other squishy champion, he's going to have a hard time, getting through that, whatever, Divine Sunder Viego with Sterix, or whatever, or the Irelia with similar items. It just seems so difficult to find a good target to hook and kill outside the laning phase. So he is good. He has tons and tons of tools that are awesome. It's just he's not as tanky as a lot of the other major tanks, and like the Alistar and the Leona, and even Maokai, and he just does not have access to the backline, right? Leona can ult it in E, Alistar can flash WQ, Maokai can flash W. They all have ways to get on those squishy champs if that's what your team needs to dive on that backline. So he's just missing that. And then we also, but he's still good otherwise. Lots of utility, lots of opportunities to make plays in the early game, especially. And then we've got Rell. Rell's kind of making a comeback. I said that she probably would off of those buffs. I think that when they lower the cooldown on her W by 1 or 2 seconds, which is her entire kit, right? That's when she transforms. It gives her more shields, gives her more flips, more damage, just kind of everything that she wants right there. And she's particularly useful right now because she can break shields with her Q. So that's underestimated a lot by people, I think, but it's a great answer to shield bow. It's a great answer to Sterix, just to hold that shield and just, boom, pop it. And even some champions like Camille, they can get a pretty big shield. Or even, like, if they have a Morgana or something like that, you can break that shield as well with your Q. And then, of course, you have the Lulus, Jannas, stuff that shields like that as well. So there's just a lot of shields in the game right now. So having that on your tank, the ability just to instantly bust the shield, potentially on multiple people, lock it. All the tanks are taking lock it as well. So tons of shields, tons of value off of the Q. And then you have pretty good engage if you can transform into either one of the forms, but especially the horse where you run at him. It's very difficult to get away from that, where she just runs at you with that extra speed and then flips you behind her and this uses the E for the stun and then the ultimate to hold you still. It's really tough, especially on champs that don't have some sort of dash to get out of it, and there are a lot of champs like that right now. You're seeing like Sivers, Jins, Ashes, Varuses, all those champs can't really get out unless they have flash. A lot of them don't have the dash. They're not taking Gale Force to get out of it. I guess Jin will probably take Gale Force, but anyways, I think it's a pretty decent meta for Rell. I might have to try her out a little bit more myself. So, yeah, pretty strong champ overall. And then, what are you looking for? Oh, I don't know. I haven't seen it. Okay, go follow Mommy. Mommy's looking for it. Help Mommy look. Okay, Bard is another one. We might go a little over 30, but I'm going to hurry up. So Bard's still good. I don't think a lot has changed on that front. It's still going to be your standard, like, Shirelia's into Deadman's. He's really good at roaming around. His ult is really solid at making plays. It's a huge skill check. You can mess it up. You can completely ruin a fight if you do it wrong. It's one of the few ultimates in the game that can actually hurt your team as much as it helps. So lots of tricks you can do with the ult. He can have some early aggression. His range is fairly short, and he is still going to be vulnerable to all-ins early on. But if you do really get those Moby Boots and start leveraging your roams, especially against immobile stuff, if you can find something immobile in the mid lane, he can be very good against that. Now, Sona's another one who got several changes on this patch, and I talked about this in the patch notes. I really don't think it's going to change much about the way that she operates. Her mana, it's going to be a little bit more expensive in the early game, 5 more mana per cast if you're near somebody, and you would have gotten that discount. You would have saved 5 mana before. Now, this is going to help you out when you're rotating between lanes by yourself or when you're going to ward with your E, so that is very good. It's going to give her a lot more personal mobility for less mana, so that's really nice. And that might be enough to make the whole change worth, just because you're going to come back to lane with an extra, 60 mana if you use your E twice to go ward or roam or whatever. The kind of stacking system, I don't know. I'm going to have to test it out and just see how fast you can stack it. But my initial thoughts is it's probably going to be at least 25 minutes, 20-25 in a lot of lanes before you stack this. Maybe against double melee that there's not really a threat or something. If they have a peeler tank like a Braum, maybe you can step up and stack it faster. But I think it's going to take a while to stack. And I think it's just, she's basically going to be the same until you get it fully stacked. Once you get it fully stacked, I think that it can be really strong, and obviously the changes to Redemption can be good on her, although again, I think you're probably going to go for the Shirelia's Putrefier package with her, but if you do want to try out like the Boonstone Redemption package, then I think that she could be good. She's still going to have her same place in the meta, same strengths, same weaknesses. Hard engage is still going to be very, very difficult with her. She wants to fight clean, front to back, 5v5 fights where you have a nice front line of tanks to protect you from the dive, and I just don't think that's happening a lot in the current meta, just because tanks get outscaled so incredibly hard, most tanks, by a lot of the bruisers who are getting the Divine Sunders and, Blade the Rune King, Sterix, all that garbage. Because why would you play just a tank that doesn't do damage when you can play a tank that does a ton of damage, like an Irelia, right? A tank, in quotes. A champion who's not supposed to be a tank, but because of all of these items is impossible to kill. So that's just the nature of the game right now. It's just there's tons of mobility, tons of damage, and it just lends itself to a much more spread out YOLO Q style, right? Like a 1-3-1 de facto type of style, and she's just not as good at roaming between lanes and skirmishing. So I still think she can be strong in the right team comp. If you get left unchecked with 3 items late game, you're going to automatically win the fight if it lasts longer than 5 seconds, basically. Especially if you do have one of those champions on your team that's difficult to kill. But overall, I just don't think it's going to change that much. I think she'll still be like a 51-52% champ. They did remove the AP nerf, so that's good, because that was going to be a big nerf to her late game if they lowered her AP ratios. But they rescinded that, and they kept the AP ratios intact, I believe. So she's still going to have pretty good scaling. Nautilus is okay. He's just squishier than the other tanks. He can't go over walls. He can escape sometimes, but that doesn't come up a ton. It's occasionally, he's going to be able to escape with his Q. A lot of times the enemy's either going to block it, or you're going to have already used your Q to start a fight, and they're going to come out of the bush and counter-engage you. So he's squishier than the other champs. His shield is not as good on his W. He does have a really nice wave clear with his E, but he is very mana-hungry compared to something like a Leona, like an Alistar. He's going to demand a bit more mana to really make use of the damage output on his E. His ult is very nice. It's fairly short range, but it does give you pretty solid access to the backline. Your hook doesn't get through the Alistar or whatever tank they have, but the ultimate can at least knock him up, and that is good. So I think that he can be all right. It just depends on how well you use him, but in general, I think he is going to be weaker than things like Leona or Alistar, especially because he can't tank towers as well early as they can. And then Nunu's kind of my special pick for people that stuck around, wanted to hang out. Now, he has a low win rate as support, but I think a lot of people are building him incorrectly, and we'll see. Maybe he's just bad. But if you ever played against mid lane Nunu, you'll understand that his ganks early are absolutely brutal. They're very good. So he could be a decent roaming support. And even ganking your own lane, it's very difficult to get away from that snowball when he comes rolling up, through the tri-bush or down the river or whatever. It's difficult to play around that. Now, he got a really, really huge buff to his AP ratios. So now it's 90% on his E if you hit everything, and that doesn't include the delayed sort of root that's also a part of his E. If you combine both of those, I think it's over 150% ratio with 400 base damage. So it's really, really high AP ratios on him, but I don't think you want to go crazy with the AP ratios, and people are just doing these meme builds with Predator and crap with him. I don't think you want to do that. I think he's going to be sort of like a Maokai-esque, AP Maokai-esque type of build where you would go Mandate into Demonic Embrace, and then maybe some tank stuff after that. Because that's going to give you some really high sort of base damage, but it also gives you some health. gives you that extra movement speed. So whenever you land your snowball on someone, it's going to give you that little burst of 20% movement speed so that you can land the second part of your E. So that's kind of like what you used to do with Phase Rush as Jungle Nunu. And I think was really good. And it's going to give your allies the extra movement speed to catch up to them. And it gives you the free AP scaling off of that. So off of the Mythic passive. So I think all in all, it's really good. And you can apply it to everybody in a team fight probably. You just press R. It's going to slow them. It's going to put the mandate proc on everybody. So it's going to give your whole team an extra 400 or 500 damage on your ult. Even if someone interrupts you. Even if you have to cancel it early. I still think that's a really, really good combination of abilities. So that's nice. It does give you a big shield, which also scales with AP, by the way. And I believe it slows the attack speed of people that are in there too. So it slows their movement speed and their attack speed. So it's a really, really good zone of control, especially against a team with a lot of melee champions in it. So I think he might have a chance. And he does have good sustain in lane. You know, you can just chomp the minions. So if you're trying to survive through poke, it's good. He has pretty high base stats, good movement speed, good base armor, good base health, good wave clear. You know, with your W, if you just roll up and hit the minions. So you got to be careful that you don't steal, you know, too many minions from your ally doing that. You might just want to hit the melees with it rather than hitting the ranged after you get a few levels in Snowball. So I'm not sure what you would level. Maybe you level your E up because that's the thing that's going to be doing a lot of damage here instead of your Q. I don't know. Maybe you still go for the Q. And don't forget, he also gives extra movement speed with his Blood Boil. So whenever you hit somebody, if you're near an ally, they're basically going to have this huge uptime of extra attack speed and extra movement speed. So he's got Bust for allies. He has lots of CC. He has lots of tankiness. Really good scaling with AP. I think he could be the next Maokai support, potentially. Now, I could totally be wrong about this, and he just could be garbage as well. I've been wrong about stuff in the past. But I'm trying to go out on a limb here to give you guys a little bit of, you know, an extra little meme build that you could get that's maybe not a meme, that maybe is good. So I think the AP ratio and the movement speed could be really good just because of the combination of Imperial Mandate and Demonic Embrace that is good. Now, I think you still want to take Aftershock with him. I think he's going to need that tankiness if you want to start fights with Snowball. So I would still go for an Aftershock, probably conditioning, overgrowth, you know, that type of build to help you be a little bit tankier. And you'll probably want to go for something like Plated Steel Caps. So don't go too hard on the AP. Don't go Sork Boots. Don't go Predator or, you know, Dark Harvest or anything like that. You still want to do the tanky stuff. You're just getting that little bit of extra AP off of Mandate and Demonic Embrace. And it's possible you could do other stuff too. You know, if you need to do Thorn Mail, I probably wouldn't do Putrefier. But if you want the extra Grievous Wounds, you can do that. Or if you want to be a little tankier, maybe you can go Dead Man's or something. But I do think that that combination of Mandate Demonic that was common on Maokai would be the way to go with him. And that's pretty much going to be it. You know, I want to keep it as close as I can under 40. I will say that I think Karma is just going to be in the gutter after this as support. I think that was a massive nerf. I know I'm going to get asked about that a lot. Win rate wise, I mean, the Nunu win rate is pretty abysmal as well. But again, I just don't think a lot of people are taking it seriously or trying it. But the Karma thing is actually pretty popular. People are trying it out. And yes, it is kind of a low sample size, but it's like 47%. And that's about where it was, or possibly even lower than where it was. So I just don't think it's happening. See the patch notes about that. I don't want to reiterate all of that again here, but pretty much just losing that movement speed on the E, like getting it nerfed from like 60% to 30 is absolutely catastrophic, especially because your R plus E used to give 100% movement speed, and now it's giving 30%. So it's a huge nerf to that. Yes, you do get a slightly higher base shield. Yes, your empowered Q is going to hit harder. Your base Q's not going to hit as hard early on. I just don't think it's going to make up for the movement speed, and I just don't think she has a great place in the meta. If you want a poke type of champ, I think there are just way better options out there. So I hate to be a downer, but I just think the Karma is going to be really bad right now. Like, I guess you can try her out if you really love her, but it's unfortunate. You know, you always hope that like these reworks or readjustments are going to be stronger, but I think they're going to be weaker. And then Braum is coming up a little bit. You know, maybe we'll try him out. He is getting played in Pro a little bit more. Some of this is that other champions are getting nerfed some. We'll keep an eye on it. I don't think there's anything like particularly new or interesting going on with Braum builds, as far as I can tell. Yeah, it's just Locket Zeke's. Just because there are so many more auto attackers right now, he's getting a lot of value out of his shield and out of his passive. I think they did buff him a few patches ago, but it's primarily just there's auto attackers everywhere. No one's playing mages, and so he just kind of fits in with that meta and that style a lot more. And then I think that's about it. Soraka, you know, she'll still be good in the same kinds of situations. She did get a buff through Moonstone and Redemption, so that is pretty nice. But she's still going to be really squishy. I'd probably rather just play like Sona or Yuumi if you want that kind of thing. But she can still be good. Tahm Kench, I think, is still not great as support, although I think he has been really strong as a top laner. So that's something to keep an eye on. But anyways, that's going to be it. So thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed this. Be sure to like and subscribe if you did. Come by. Check us out on Twitch. The Strategy Professor, streaming every night starting around 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, usually going till 2 or 3 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Very friendly, chill community. Love to have you. Check out the rest of the content on the YouTube as well. And I'll see you next time.